Hello everybody, this is Jarrett, and today I'm going to be walking you through my lab, which is Physical OSPF version 2. And the idea behind this lab is to kind of introduce you to the new workspace that we have in Packet Tracer version 8, uh, and to kind of help students bridge the gap between, you know, early networking and the logical workspace in Packet Tracer and moving over to real equipment. The new physical workspace provides just a perfect medium for that, and that's what we're going to be exploring today. Moving on down to our overview. In the following lab, you will learn how to configure multi-area OSPF in a simulated physical workspace using Packet Tracer version 8. This lab is meant to get you used to visualizing the connections between physical components, locations, and networks. For this lab, we will be focusing on OSPF version 2. As it focuses on IPv4 addresses. So what is OSPF? OSPF stands for Open Shortest Path First and was made as an alternative to RIP routing in larger networks. As networks explode in complexity, RIP routing becomes less reliable for the fact that it can't scale as easily to the many routes and speeds like OSPF can. OSPF routing uses areas, and every routing area can be controlled and have its traffic updated within that area. Unlike single-area OSPF, multi-area OSPF divides Area 0 into multiple areas. Between these multiple areas, one is designated Area 0, and that acts as the backbone for the network. If you wanted a large network to support hierarchical routing, you could split it up into multiple areas via OSPF and maintain routing between areas while keeping intensive tasks localized within that area. OSPF is configured around 3 different values. Process ID can be any number between 1 and 65,535. This is the identifier for the specific OSPF process you are configuring. In this lab, the process ID is 1. Area ID is how you specify which area you are configuring for. In this lab, there is area 0, 1, and 2. Wildcard Mask is used for syntax reasons and is the exact inverse of the interface's subnet mask. For example, if your subnet mask is 255.255.255.0, then your wildcard would be 0.0.0.255. This isn't always necessary depending on the configuration method you use, but it is still an important part of OSPF configuration. In this lab, the wildcard masks for our configurations are in the tables below. Now moving on down to our objective. Your goal for this lab is to connect the 3 remote work sites via OSPF version 2. Both Area 1 at Site 1 and Area 2 at Site 2 are configured, and you must bridge the gap between the 2 areas between Sites 3 and 4. Sites 3 and 4 have a wiring closet with an area border router, each that will form Area 0, the backbone between Areas 1 and 2. So by the end of this lab, you will have a better understanding of OSPF, know how to configure area backbone and multi-area OSPF, gain better understanding of how multi-area OSPF is implemented on physical equipment, and be familiarized with the new physical workspace in Packet Tracer version 8. Heading on down again, we have our tables with our IP addresses and whatnot. So here are our network IDs for each area, followed by the wildcard. And then below that are the IP address configurations for each interface that we'll be playing with during this lab. So moving on down again, racking and wiring equipment. So the rack is the place where all of your networking devices are stored and where their power is supplied to them. Packet Tracer 8 allows us to simulate the experience of racking and wiring all of our equipment on the physical side. Racking any equipment will automatically supply power to it. With that being said, you can power up to 14 devices at a time. For the next step, you may need to zoom in or out in order to get a full view of the various sites. They're spread out over large areas, so use the map above as your guide for which site has which router. Now on to step 1. When you first enter Packet Tracer version 8, click on the Physical tab on the top left corner. Next, you will be greeted with an image of the home city. Click on it to get a view of the various sites where our lab hypothetically takes place. For this lab, we will mainly be focusing on sites 3 and 4. Click on site 3 and immediately click on the wiring closet located on site in site 3 office building. Once there, you simply click on the router sitting on the table and drag it over to the rack to rack the device. Packet Tracer will automatically provide power, but wiring will have to be done manually. Now here in our logical workspace in Packet Tracer, we're going to go up to the top corner here and click on Physical. As you can see, that opens up our little map here, but we need to go to our home city, which is here, so we're going to click on that. And then as you can see, it opens up our 4 sites just like it does in our lab manual. So the first thing that we're going to do is click into our site 3 here. Then we're going to immediately click on our wiring closet. And then here we have our router. So racking them is incredibly simple. All you got to do is just click on it and then bring it over to the rack. And boom, you're done. And it's already supplied power, just like the manual said. Now, we're going to exit, and then go to our other office building, site 4. Click on the wiring closet there. And there we have another router. All we got to do is drag and drop. It's as simple as that. Now moving on down to step 2. Wire laptops to routers and the routers to each other. In order to actually configure the router for OSPF, you will need to actually interface with it using a console cable. A laptop has been provided at each site to make configuration possible. Below the workspace, click the connections box and click the console option from the right. The console cable is used to connect the computer's terminal to the networking device, allowing you to configure it. Connect one end of the console cable to the RS-232 port on the laptop and the other end to the console port on the routers. Finally, connect the 2 routers to each other according to the table above using copper crossover cable, which is used to connect light devices. Now back over to our packet tracer. I believe we are still at site 4. We're going to go ahead and click on connections, then move over to our console cable here. Now it can be very small, so don't be afraid to zoom in if you need to, but we're just going to go ahead and connect this to the correct port, the RS-232 port, and then the other end to our console port there. Then we're going to do the exact same thing over here on site 3. Come down to connections, click on console, connect it to the RS-232 port, and then to the console port. Now we're going to bridge the gap between the two. Now this can be a little tricky, but here's the trick for getting it done really quickly. So we're going to go on down to our copper crossover here. click on our site 3, go to the rack, our router, gigabit Ethernet 0/1, and then gonna do the same for this one. Wiring closet, rack, site 4, router 2, 0/1. Now for the fun part, actually configuring OSPF version 2 at area 0. Now is the time to join the two areas together, creating area 0. In this lab, area 0 is comprised of two area border routers, separated between sites 3 and 4. Now that your routers are racked and wired, you must correctly configure them for OSPF. Start by configuring the interfaces of R1 and R2 according to the table above using the laptop provided. First, click on the laptop, then click Desktop on the top menu. From there, click on Terminal. To configure the routers as if it were a CLI. Before R1 and R2 can be capable of OSPF, their interfaces must be assigned IP addresses and turned on. The interfaces are up, so now you can configure OSPF. Using the information from the table above, configure R1 and R2 appropriately within the terminal. R3 and R4 have already been configured under the OSPF process ID of 1, so we will do the same for R1 and R2. There are two ways to configure OSPF. The network command method, which is useful for doing multiple IP addresses under a certain process ID. So here you list router OSPF and then the process ID, which for us is 1. And then you just go and list the network ID, wildcard, and then followed by the area, which for this area, it would be 0. And then there's the IP OSPF command method, which is useful for interface specific configuration and uses the interface's IP address. And here, this is where you would interface with the actual port, and then you could go in and then add OSPF to that port, so that the port knows that it's supposed to be using OSPF. This is best practice to explicitly configure a router ID for each router configured under OSPF so that they are more identifiable for troubleshooting purposes. One based on the highest address. Sites 1 and 2 are already configured with router IDs that correspond with their host name. If you wish to do the same with sites 3 and 4, use the command below. Then you type in router ID, or router OSPF 1, and then you enter the router ID, which will usually be something like 1.1.1.1 or 2.2.2.2, just something very simple that's used to identify. Alright, so now we are actually going to start configuring our routers using our laptops that are now connected to them through the console cable. And we're actually going to use the IP OSPF command method, but you can use any method you want. So I'm going to start by clicking on our laptop here, going to desktop, we're already there, to terminal, then hit OK. And as you can see, we're inside of the router, just like we would be in the CLI in the logical workspace. So I'm going to start by hitting enable, then config T. And we actually are going to have to start by configuring our interfaces. So I'm going to move this over. Then we're going to scroll back up to our handy chart so that we know what needs to go where. So here we have R1 on gigabit Ethernet 0/1, so we're going to start with that. G0/1 IP address 121.8 255.8.1, 255.255.0. Then we're going to no shut. You can't actually use OSPF unless there's one up interface at least. Now we're going to type in our OSPF command right back down here. So we're actually already interfaced on the port, so now we just need to type OSPF 1, which is our process ID, and then which area this is for. And this is going to be for 0. So IP OSPF 1 area 0. And it's as simple as that. Now to go down to our next interface, gigabit Ethernet 0/2, IP address 10.121.16.1, 255.255.255.0. Then we're going to do a no shut on that one as well. There we go. Then an IP OSPF 1, which is our process ID, but this is actually going to be for area 1, as you can see by this one. Since we're using a 10.121.16.0 network ID, it's going to be for area 1, which connects R1 and R3. So we're going to go ahead and type area 1. Now we're going to do the same for site 4. Head over to our laptop, click on it, go to desktop, terminal, hit OK. Then we're going to enable config T interface, which isn't, I'm sure it's always the same. Yes, there it is. Gigabit Ethernet 0/1, and we do an interface. Oh, we already interfaced, so it would be an IP address 10.121.8.2, then a 255.255.255.0 subnet mask. Then we're gonna do a no shut to turn port on, and then we're gonna add our OSPF. So IP OSPF process ID 1 area, and this will be for area 0 once again. Then I'm gonna exit and do the same thing for our other interface. Oh, there you can see that we have our pop-up saying that the OSPF is now in full, working at full capacity. Now we're gonna interface G0/2, IP address 10.121.24.2. Uh-oh, little typo there. And then our subnet mask, which is 255.255.255.0. Then we're going to do a no shut, turn the port on, and the IP OSPF process ID 1 area. This is actually going to be for area 2, which connects R2 and R4. Area 2. And end. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and check the status of the OSPF and make sure that the two routers can indeed ping each other. So let's open up our laptop, enable, and we're going to type in the command show IP OSPF neighbor. As you can see, it pulls up both. on both sides of it in area 0 and area 1. Let's do the same for our router over here. Enable show IP OSPF neighbor. Same thing here, looking good. Let's just make sure it can ping. Let's go back up, verify. And 121.8.2. Success. And let's do the same for the other just to be sure. Ping 121.8.1. Success. Now that we've verified connectivity and ping between both routers, that means that we are done. I would highly recommend that you take the short quiz at the end to test your knowledge. And if you did end up completing my lab, then I hope that you gained something out of this. And if you were feeling a little shaky on physical equipment before, hopefully that changed by the end of this. Thank you.